Xiao got drip marketed last night, and she's revealed to be an ice defense character. And in general, defense has been a very awkward position because they don't release a lot of defense characters. The interval between Caesar and Panyan Hu was 5 updates, which is a very long time for a single class to get one new character. It's kind of like with a Lighter. Lighter came out in 1.3. The next Stunner came out in 1.6. But, it's still 3 updates. And when 1.6 came out, they released Trigger and Pulchra. So you technically got 2 new Stunners. And then after that, you got Jufufu in 2.0. So it's an equal amount of Stunners releasing, in the times that they release like an anomaly character, an attack character, a support character. But defense has really got the freaking end of the stick because they just never release new defense characters in the games. 1.0 you had Ben, 1.1 you had Seth, 1.2 you had Caesar, 2.0 you had freaking Panyan Hu, and now 2.5 is Zhao. You notice how big of a number shift that is? 2.0 was the last defense character. It's gonna be 2.5, and they're freaking now only releasing another defense character. And 2.0 released all the way back in June. Let's just start off with the most earliest one, Ben. Ben overall is very, unique in his way because he's the only character that actually has a team up mechanic and overall is the first defense character that is ever in the game. Essentially, he was just a big hunk of metal. He was just you built him with a bunch of defense, and he scaled off of it. Essentially, he was a sub DPS in his own way, where his attack increased the more defense you got. So the more defense you got, he's dealing more damage, and he also had the whole shield that if you used the X special attack and did a follow-up attack, then everyone got a shield and everyone would get like a crit rate buff. And that was pretty decent. That was a pretty decent move back then because hey, I like crit rate buffs. I like shields. I'm pretty bad. I'm not that good at dodging attacks. Again, the shield protects me in the hollow zeros, all these like end game modes. And that crit rate buff, nice. I have a little support from this Ben character, while he's also acting as a sub DPS. This is nice. This is awesome. Then 1.1 came, and you had Seth, and Seth was pretty interesting. He wasn't really like a typical defender because he only provided one shield. He wasn't like a team-wide shield, unlike Ben. The best gimmick that Seth has is that he's pretty much a defensive buffer for anomaly characters. Whoever the character has gets an anomaly proficiency buff, and it's pretty decent. And there's also the added fact that Seth can also again act like a sub DPS if he's M6, and overall is built pretty well because you build him with attack since his shield scales off attack, and overall his role in the game was essentially you throw him in an anomaly team, and you get your anomaly team to get that shield, to get an anomaly proficiency buff, to get some anomalies out there. Seth also just has high days numbers, so he's practically a sub DPS, a buffer, a shielder, and also a stunner in one character if you have N4. In general, these defense characters are seemingly good. Like, they honestly are pretty decent. I remember people using them back then, but because, they had some value to them, especially Seth. Seth had some value to him. Ben, not all that much. It's not like Ben was, like, neglected, but a lot of people were like, it's not really worth it to use Ben with Kaleda teams. You might as well just use another support character than Ben, like Nicole or Lucy with your Soldier 11. But, people were still occasionally like, yeah, Ben is there. So if you want a crit rate buff as a sub DPS, you can throw him in there. If you want a shield, then cool, that's also there. Then in 1.2, you had Caesar. Caesar, I remember, everyone was freaking blowing up. They were calling her the most OP character ever, the most broken thing ever, and just calling her insane. And it was just like, dang, man, is she that good? Not really. Her shield is very good. Essentially, Caesar's kit revolves around, parrying and getting that shield while also building her up with a bunch of impact. She's, again, essentially like Seth, a stunner while also being a shooter into one character. I don't know much about the whole sub DPS aspect, but she is a very good stunner in her own way because you build her with stunner. She gives herself freaking impact when you parry and stuff like that. But she's not exactly like a broken. She's only really broken if you suck at dodging because her shield again is really good. It's not like a normal like shield that pops up in the health bar. It's just its own separate thing that appears near your characters. But essentially, Caesar is a shielder and a stunner, and that's really decent. I like this aspect. I like that these defense characters are not just solely defense characters. They're, partially sub DPSs or sub stunners or just in general buffers. And, they also, but while also providing that main aspect of the shield mechanic, it's a nice overall. They overall feel healthy, and considering they released 3 defense characters in 3 patches in a row, that's pretty insane. But then 1.3 all the way to 2.0, no defense characters, and we're just kind of twiddling our thumbs like, man, when's the next defense characters? They released Panyan Hu, and wow, a new defense character after 5 updates. And this is insane. This is crazy. This is awesome. Great job. Great job. I'm so excited to see what they do. He does practically nothing in terms of defense. He's practically a worser version of Lucia. Panyan Hu's kit is essentially this. Build him with attack, increases sheer force buff, and he heals. No shield? Is he a sub DPS? No. Is he a sub stunner? No. Is he a support? Yes. And that's where defense is turning in a very confusing direction. Defense is no longer about defending. It's literally just another role for supports. Panyan Hu's kit is literally a support class. There is nothing in his kit that really screams defense, because comparing Panyan Hu's kit to Lucia's kit, they're very similar. They're practically the same in what they do. They heal, they prefer a shield force buff, and there are some other aspects of Lucia's kit that, isn't in Panyan Hu's kit, but they're practically the same character, just one is worse than the other. And overall begs the question, why is Panyan Hu defense? It feels like they just overall saw that people were like, where's defense? Where's the new defense character? So they were just like, okay, throw in just make Panyan Hu a defense character. And overall, he just doesn't have anything of value that makes him a defense character. He provides no shields. He's not really a sub DPS. He doesn't really have what the other characters were going for in terms of what defense was going to be. A shielder while also providing buffs. Panyan Hu is just a support class. He perfectly fits for support because he doesn't do anything in terms of shields that plays into what the previous 3 defense characters were doing. Panyan Hu doesn't even have like counters. It's not like freaking Caesar where if you press the button at the right time, she does a counter and gives herself impact. Caesar doesn't, freaking Panyan Hu doesn't have that. All you do in freaking Panyan Hu teams is essentially skill, occasionally ult, and then boom. That's all his value that you're really doing. Of course, there's the sheer force buff, but at that point, I'm just describing a freaking support character. I'm not describing a shielder or a defense character. And it's just like, why, man? Why? What's the point of this defense class if we're going this route of just making defense characters just supports? Now with the kit leak of Xiao, it's the same thing. She's a healer while also being a buffer. Why is it like this? Why is defense even a class at this point if we're not even doing what we were doing originally with defense characters? Having that shield aspect while also making them a sort of sub role for another class. Ben was your defender sub DPS. Caesar was your overall defender sub stunner. Seth was your defender sub support. Now with Panyan Hu, he is not a defender. He's just a support. That's all he does. And with Zhao, what defense capabilities does she do? All she does is support. That's all she does. That's the two things that the last two defense characters have had no shield capabilities and overall have not been considered sub roles for any other class. They've just been one single sub role, and that's support, a class that already exists. And defense class overall is bringing back memories of Remembrance. I have overall hated Remembrance in Honkai Star Rail, not because I think the class is necessarily bad, it's more so that the class has no reason to exist besides to just screw over free-to-play players. Hoyoverse barely releases free Remembrance light cones in Honkai Star Rail, so you're practically stuck with barely anything if you don't pull on the character's signature weapon, and you're stuck with like maybe 2 freaking 4-star light cones that just in general suck. And then you have the 5-star Herda light cone, which they still haven't made a feature where you can duplicate Herda light cones so you can put it on other characters. It's still just one light cone, and it's just like, man, what the freak. And defense is exactly the same. Defense overall doesn't get characters released. They don't release a lot of defense, they don't release a lot of defense wenjins. So when a new defense character comes out, and if you don't want to pull on their signature weapon, you're kind of like, wow, okay, I have literally nothing because none of the other wenjins benefit my character. Majority of defense wenjins either buff defense, attack, and that's kind of it. Okay, I just checked, all the defense wenjins, and literally there's only one defense wenjin, free one, that already exists that works with Zhao if you don't pull for Zhao's signature wenjin, and it's the original Transmorpher. Every other wenjin is either attack or defense. Something that Zhao does not want because she scales off of HP for her buffs. Listen, this is Remembrance all over again. They don't release wenjins for a class. So then when a new character that comes out, there is literally no way for free-to-play players to have anything to put on that character. And sure, it is different between the two games. Honkai Star releases a buttload of Remembrance characters. The only difference is that they don't release any 4-star equivalents or any 4-star light cones for Remembrance. So people are stuck with the same 3.0 the same 3.0 light cone that they released for free. And like most of the time, some of it doesn't even work on some characters. You don't even want it sometimes. The only reason people put that on is literally for the crit damage buff, but that's it. The actual effect barely works on most characters. In general, defense in ZZZ is very odd and is taking a turn in a direction that I really kind of don't like. Because again, I really like the whole aspect that they were having with defense characters with their first 3, where they acted as shielders and defenders while also acting as a sub-role for a different whole other class. Now with Panyan Hu and Zhao, they're literally just support characters. They have no defensive capabilities besides healing, but again, we just had Lucia and also there's Astra Yao. So it's like, what's the point of these characters? Why do they exist if they're just gonna now just stray them from being defensive characters that are sub-roles in other classes to now just being supports, but disguised in a costume called defense. Overall, I really hope that ZZZ and the team kind of goes back to how defense characters were by making them, the shield aspect, while also, having that goody old sub-role in another class. Because in general, most people, again, are already pretty decent. In general, the healing aspect is only really useful for, like, the rupture characters, because their whole gimmick is losing HP. These other characters, don't need it because you're not gonna get hit. Like if you're using seed, you're not gonna get hit, bro. Like you're just bad if you're getting hit. But that's one of the reasons why people would run defense characters. In case they did get hit, they wouldn't lose HP. The shield would protect them. But while also having that shield, you would also have that defensive, you would also have the other like sub role again, like Caesar. Caesar has a very good shield, but hey, when she is on the field, she's also acting as a stunner, and it's pretty cool. Overall, that's just my thoughts on defense because, defense barely gets characters. So when a new defense character comes up, I'm always curious to see what that happens, because one of my favorite kind of classes in like MMOs are paladins, and I really like paladins because they have the whole gimmick is they take damage, and when you use them to attack, they output an extreme amount of damage. It's really cool, but that kind of gimmick, that kind of playstyle won't ever work in ZZZ, a fast-paced action game. So they won't ever do that. So I really hope that for future defense characters, they go back to how they were doing with the 3 first defense characters, making them have that shield aspect while, the sub roles. Because right now, the 2 latest defense characters have been straight up been underwhelming, to say the least, for the respective class that they've been, because they're just secretly supports in a defense class when they're barely defensive, because the only thing they do is heal. Like, come on. But yeah, that's all I got. Yeah.